Prologue. There were 4 of them. Dark spectres creeping furtively between the cathedral columns of the copse, careful to avoid the dappled pools of silver that penetrated the overhead canopy of leaves from the waning moon. They were nervous and alert, heads stiffly raised, like animals sniffing for the scent of danger carried on the wind. Through the ghostly green viewer of the night sight, Captain Robert Darcy was able to identify 3 of them before they reached the perimeter of the stump-scattered clearing. It wasn't difficult, despite the blackened hands and faces. Darcy knew the men well, intimately almost. They made up the local PIRA Active Service Unit. A farmer, a baker, and, appropriately enough, a life insurance salesman. That was O'Neill, their leader, and a particularly unpleasant specimen who had repeatedly evaded conviction. Always insufficient evidence and a cast-iron alibi. He would strut the village streets with the smugness of a cat who knew it still had several of its lives left. Arrogant, proficient, and exceptionally vicious. Typically, Darcy noted, he carried an Armalite AR-18. O'Neill favoured the cheap and very nasty Widowmaker, and was frequently heard to boast how he had contributed to its chilling reputation. Darcy watched as the man settled down to wait, to be certain. Patient. Always professional. That was how he had survived so long. The provost's head turned slightly, scanning the clearing. Then a jerking motion as his eye caught the movement high up on the road embankment. A torn piece of blue plastic from a fertilizer bag flapped irritatingly from the barbed wire fence. The distractor had been deliberately placed by the Special Air Service team. Its purpose was to lure the eye away from the cunningly concealed observation post just a few meters away. The position had been dug in the dead of night 2 weeks earlier, tunnelled into the embankment overlooking the clearing. When completed, the foxhole had been roofed with a roll of chicken wire, over which the turfs had been expertly relayed. That damp and cramped space was to be home for as long as it took the provost to revisit their arms cache. For 2 weeks the 4-man Sabre team, Villiers, Rix, and the unholy alliance of Monk and Pope, had endured the monotony of self-heating canned rations and the indignities of defecating and burying the results in the confined space. Although worse to suffer, each man would swear, was the incessant call of a pair of nearby wood-pigeons which drove them to the very edge of insanity. Always 2 on stag while 2 slept, their only link with the outside world was via the clansman radio. A welcome break to the monotony would be the daily passing of the postman, whistling as he cycled down the lane beyond the barbed wire, and the dairy van that came to collect milk churns from the surrounding farms. All such comings and goings were religiously timed and entered in the log. 2 months earlier, at the regiment's characterless, brick-built Stirling Lines barracks outside the county town of Hereford, Darcy had been summoned unexpectedly to the office of Major Johnny Fraser. The quietly spoken Scot was commander of the counter-revolutionary warfare wing of the SAS, which specialised in anti-terrorist training techniques.
"Ah, Rob," Fraser greeted. "I believe you've met this old friend of ours, Brigadier General Roquelaure. General, Captain Rob Darcy, my 2IC.
Darcy's face broke into an impromptu grin as Roquelaure rose to shake hands. The Frenchman was shorter than he remembered, or else it was an illusion created by the added inches around the waist which filled the immaculate grey silk suit.
"Hallo, Pierre! What a lovely surprise! Ça va?"
The Frenchman's handshake was as firm and dry as ever, and his pale blue eyes twinkled amid the laugh lines in the broad face. But even the ingrained tan, earned during years serving in French colonies around the world, could not disguise a certain gauntness in his features.
Je suis fatigué, mon ami, très fatigué.
Roquelaure turned to Major Fraser.
Forgive me, Johnny. How rude you must think us both.
The CRW chief waved the apology aside with a short laugh.
No problem, Pierre. Even I could follow that.
You're still with the Ministère de la Défense? Darcy asked. Roquelaure nodded. His role, Darcy knew, was that of liaison between the Secret Service, the DGSE, and the Groupe d'Intervention de la Gendarmerie Nationale. It was the French equivalent of the SAS anti-terrorist group, and both units regularly exchanged ideas as well as training facilities.
Oui, for my sins and my grey hair, I am with the Ministère still.
Darcy frowned.
Then I can guess why you're here.
The Paris bombings, Fraser confirmed grimly. Roquelaure raised his hands in a very Gallic expression of despair.
I have never known the city in such a state of near panic, mon ami. Such carnage and human misery. Bombs in the Champs-Élysées and the Prefecture of Police near Notre-Dame and Rue de Rennes. No one wants to use the metro or even our cafes anymore. The streets are deserted. There has been nothing like it since the Algerian business. For once, our politicians are even agreeing that we need help, and have swallowed their pride.
Darcy smiled tersely. Whilst British and French special forces happily cooperated, politicians on both sides of the Channel perpetuated the history that the countries were each other's oldest enemy. As Roquelaure had once told Darcy,
the trouble is our people are too alike in their approach to nationalism. You British think that you are the best, while we French know we are. Mon Dieu.
We are exploring areas of cooperation, Fraser admitted cautiously. But I've called you in on a matter of what the General can do for us. Would you like to explain, Pierre? The Frenchman nodded, opened a packet of gitane, and lit one. The pungent, bitter aroma instantly filled the room.
This campaign in Paris, Robert, we believe it is to gain the release of the Lebanese terrorist Georges Abdallah. He is serving a 4-year sentence, and we have just moved him to a new prison to prevent an attempted jailbreak. We believe his brothers may be behind these outrages. But this gang, whoever they are, have powerful help from a Lebanese Shiite faction calling itself the Besran Behesht.
Darcy shook his head.
Don't think I know them.
Roquelaure grimaced.
Unfortunately, I think you will in time. Translated, it means, you say, sons or children of paradise, or heaven, if you prefer. It doesn't translate exactly, but the meaning is clear. They are religious fanatics associated with the Iranian Party of God, or Hezbollah, and run by a leader who calls himself Sabah.
Sabah, Darcy repeated softly. That rings some bells. Fraser consulted the computer printout on his desk.
The name first began cropping up in the mid-70s, Rob, in connection with the Palestine Liberation Organization. It's an adopted cover name, we gather, derived from some 11th century assassin in Persia, which gives a clue to the man's background. A Shiite Lebanese with Iranian ancestry. But little is known beyond that. Conflicting descriptions and always confused reports as to his whereabouts. Very mysterious and very professional.
He's no longer with the PLO, Darcy asked.
Fraser shook his head. In the late 70s, Sabah became disillusioned with Arafat's softly approach and virtually went freelance, like Abu Nidal some years before. He moved with a group of followers to Libya. There he acted on his own and Gaddafi's behalf for several years. Political assassination, bombings in Europe, and 2 aircraft hijacks.
Fraser looked up from the printout.
But it was during the downfall of the Shah and the Islamic Revolution in '79 that he really moved into the big league. I think the General has greater detail on more recent events."
Rocklore stubbed out his cigarette.
"Unfortunately, Robert, I do not need to consult notes. The facts are ingrained in my heart. You see, Sabah was involved with training young Iranians for the 79 uprising in camps in Libya, Lebanon, and Syria. By the time Khomeini took over, Sabah had found his roots, I think you say, a cause and a divine mission. He still maintained his links with Libya, but drew closer to Iran. Indeed, it was he who brought the alliance between the two countries closer together in their campaigns of state-sponsored terrorism. In March '82, there was a meeting in Tehran of Shiite revolutionary movements from all over the Arab and Western worlds. A major campaign was established, and $100 million immediately allocated to support worldwide terrorism in the name of Islam. It was organized by the Iranian Foreign Ministry's Department for the Export of Revolution, and one of its chief exponents was...
Darcy saw it coming.
"Sabah," he murmured.
A silence fell between the three men. The air in the small room seemed suddenly chill.
"The rest is history,"
Rocklore said wearily, lighting another gitan.
"Sabah formed a sort of inner caucus of the Hezbollah, although their actions took place under a confusion of names. Even the PLO used the name of Fedayeen after the original Sabah's men of sacrifice. Nevertheless, he had been so successful by '84 that he was given permission to expand his Sons of Heaven, creating suicide squads to attack his Arab enemies. And, I regret, France."
Darcy raised an eyebrow.
"Why France in particular? You once played host to Khomeini."
A wan smile crossed Rocklore's tired face.
"And since the Islamic Revolution we have given sanctuary to his enemies. And thanks to Sabah and his Pesaran Behesht, we have paid the price, believe me. So penetrating his organization has been one of our prime objectives, as you can imagine."
Darcy leant against the wall, his arms folded.
"With what success?"
For a moment the General's gloomy expression lifted slightly.
"After many failures, we managed to get one of our agents, whom I shall call Tashakur, into a Sabah cell operating out of Tunisia. It is he who gave us the information that I have just passed on to Major Fraser."
Darcy's eyes moved across to the CRW chief, who now had a top-secret file open amid the pile of printouts.
"This agent Tashakur reports that the Pesaran Behesht have developed links with the PIRA, along with Action Direct in France and West German terrorists associated with the former Baader-Meinhof gang. It's the usual story of scratching each other's backs. According to Tashakur, Sabah is acting for Libya and Iran to smuggle arms to Era. Vast quantities, some of it very sophisticated, valued at some £60 million sterling, will be smuggled in over the next couple of years. PIRA will get a large part of the consignment, while the rest will be distributed to Pesaran Behesht and other Iranian terrorist networks throughout Europe."
Darcy let out a low whistle.
"Using Ireland as the usual back door to Europe. Thank God your chap's been able to give us some warning."
An apprehensive silence followed as Fraser and Rocklore traded glances.
Fraser said quietly, "Not quite, Rob. The first shipment has already landed."
For Darcy, the next few days were filled with frantic activity as he established a special unit within the SAS's own Kremlin intelligence department. Ongoing liaison was opened with Rocklore and the French intelligence community, UK Customs and Excise, the RUC, and Irish Special Branch. At the end of the initial period, all the pointers were that the information from the agent Tashakur had been correct. Sifting through the usual glut of rumour and speculation,